Okay, class. This is your virtual lab video. I've taken each of the samples in today's lab and I've scrambled them up and assigned them a certain number. So you can see here we have 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. So there are 10 samples. You will have a corresponding assignment on Canvas that asks you each of these colors. So you have samples 1 through 10. They're going to ask you the luster, which I'm not really going to talk about. I'm just going to show you the sample and let you determine whether you think it's metallic or non-metallic. They're going to ask you about the hardness, which I will try to help you determine since you can't touch these or use any of the tools. They're going to ask you about the cleavage, which I will maybe give you a couple clues on, but that's also a visual thing, and so you should be able to determine that from this video and the other video that I posted describing each of these minerals. The streak, I will show you the streak on the streak plate and let you determine what color it is. If there's any special properties, I will try to note those and at least show you how those work. And then you will try to determine the mineral name, which is the most important, but you want to also answer the rest of these questions. I will also post the mineral identification chart, which should help you with this specific lab. It really only has the information for these particular minerals. I will also post a more inclusive mineral chart that shows you many of the common minerals and has some really detailed information about their hardness, their specific gravity, system habit, which is crystal shape, their cleavage if they have any or if it's none. There are any other observations about it, and of course the name and the chemical formula for that mineral. So this may be a little too much information, but I want to provide it to you in case it helps you out on any of these questions. So starting off, we have mineral number 1 here. I'll kind of try to get you a good view in the camera of what this looks like. Hopefully you can see some of the angles that are going on here, the color of it. It is transparent, translucent. Let's go ahead and start with the scratch test. My fingernail is not able to scratch it. I go to the penny next, which, just a quick reminder, this is the Mohs hardness scale, so I will be using these tools that I have available to me. I don't have a masonry bit, but I don't think we have anything really that hard. There's no corundum or diamond on the test, so I will start with my fingernail, then go to a copper penny, use a knife if necessary, although glass plate works fine for that, and then a steel nail, which I also have. So the penny test. So it might be a little difficult to see, but I was able to leave a scratch on the sample right there. And when I try to rub it away, the scratch still remains. It's kind of a light scratch, but it is a scratch. And so this mineral should be softer than 3.5 on your hardness scale. I don't know where it is below 3.5, but it should be softer than 3.5 on your hardness scale. Just to test, since we have it here, does this fizz with acid? Put a drop on here, and this does not fizz with acid. The acid just spreads out on it. You don't get any bubbles, no CO2 production, so it does not react with acid. And I'm not going to lick this particular piece, but I would tell you that if you did happen to lick it, it would have a salty taste on the tongue. go ahead and just for visual, we will do the streak. You can see that it leaves behind a white streak, which makes sense because it's clear. It shouldn't be a dark colored streak. It does leave behind a white streak. And I think that's about all we need to go over for that sample. If you have any questions about any of these samples, please email me, and I should be able to answer your questions about them, as long as it doesn't give it away. Here's your next sample. This does not show any cleavage faces, and so there's a possibility that this mineral does have cleavage. It's just not a really good sample for that. This just happens to be a massive piece. You do see some layering in here, but that doesn't really matter. It's all the same mineral. So this is your color. Let's go ahead and try to scratch this. My fingernails are pretty short right now, but they're still the same hardness. And I got no scratches with my fingernail, so it's harder than 2.5. Let's try it with a penny. Let's try this on top. This one actually was not scratched by the penny either. You can see there's black streaks being left behind. That's actually the penny kind of destroying itself on the sample, and not vice versa. So this one is harder than a penny, so harder than 3.5. Although these are newer pennies. Let's try the nail. And yes, this time I was able to leave a scratch with the nail right next to the mark that the penny left behind. There's my scratch. If I try to wipe this away, it does not go away. So the hardness of the sample is probably somewhere in between a 3.5 and a 6.5. Let's see if it scratches the plate. Hello. Hey, I'm recording a video, so just give me a minute or a little bit. You can come back in a little while. It's not a big deal, but so try to scratch a plate with it, and it did not scratch the plate. So this is not harder than a 5.5. So our hardness is probably for this one going to be somewhere in between a 3.5 and a 5.5. I will note this penny is not an old copper penny. If you see, the date on this is like 2000 something. It's kind of worn off. Maybe 2009. And so this is not a pure copper penny, which is the hardness of 3.5, and so the hardness might be a little off on the penny. So we did our scratch test. It is harder than a penny, softer than the glass plate, so somewhere in between a 3.5 and a 5.5. Let's see about our drip test with the acid. You can see that it is bubbling with the acid. It's producing a lot of nice bubbles there. So this one does react with the acid, produce CO2 bubbles, which should be a pretty good identifier of what mineral this is. We'll go ahead and do the streak test. Does leave behind a white streak, which should help you out. So we have a special property for this one. We have the streak. It doesn't show any cleavage, but that doesn't mean that this mineral doesn't have cleavage, just this sample isn't showing it. The hardness is between a copper penny and a glass plate. And we will move on to the next sample. This one has a pink color, a light white to pink color. I'm not seeing a whole lot of cleavage here, although there is a little. If I hold it like this, can see that right there is probably a cleavage plane. That's pretty flat. Here's maybe another cleavage plane. And if you hold it just right, there might be a couple here on the bottom. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes, especially if the sample isn't great. But this does look like it shows cleavage. Let's do the hardness test. No scratches with the fingernail. No scratches with the penny. Let's see if it scratches a glass plate. Yes, this one did leave behind a scratch on the glass plate. Might be a little hard to see. Let's see if I can see it. This second scratch right here. I just put that on there. So it is harder than a glass plate, so harder than 5.5. So harder than a fingernail, harder than a penny, harder than a glass plate. Let's check it with a steel nail. Let's see what we can get here. Not really getting any scratch with the steel nail, although again, this might not be the best nail to use. So pretty hard, harder than a steel nail, I think. Possibly. Maybe harder than 6.5. Maybe right around 6.5, depending on the hardness of the nail. Let's see if it leaves a streak behind. It does leave a streak, a white streak. And so it is softer than a streak plate. Let me look real quick and see, because I don't remember off the top of my head. How hard is a streak plate? Streak plate hardness. So streak plate is a 7.5. So on your chart here, it's probably going to be somewhere around a 6.5. We know it's harder than 5.5 because it did not, or it did scratch the glass plate. We know it's softer than a 7.5 because it did not scratch the streak plate. It left a streak behind on the streak plate. So probably somewhere in between a 5.5 and a 7.5 for the hardness of this sample. We'll see if it fizzes with acid. Drip the acid on there, and we have no bubbles, no fizzing, just a little drop of acid. And I think that's about it for this one. So that is sample 3. Now moving on to sample 4. This is a black in color sample. It feels pretty heavy in my hand compared to the size of it. We will go ahead and start with the hardness test of it. This is not showing any cleavage at all. I would venture a guess that this sample does not have any cleavage. Not just that it doesn't show it, but the mineral does not have it. So definitely harder than my fingernail. Definitely harder than a penny. Let's see if it is harder than the glass plate. Yes, might be hard for you to see. That scratch right there was just left by this. So it is harder than a glass plate at 5.5. Let's see if we can get a scratch in it with a nail. This is going to be hard to see. Because of the color of the mineral, it's going to be difficult to see if the nail is scratching it or not. Let's go ahead and use the streak plate. See if it leaves behind a streak. It does leave behind a streak, so we have a nice black streak here. So The nail might be a little inconclusive, but we know it's harder than a glass plate, softer than a streak plate at 7.5. Let me see if I can write that in. Get a pencil over here somewhere. There it is. There we go. Not super visible, but 7.5 streak plate. So it's going to be in between a 5.5 and a 7.5 hardness for this particular sample. Does it fizz with acid? Probably not, but we'll check it out anyways. So you have the acid on there, no bubbles, no fizzing, just sitting there doing nothing. So go ahead and wipe that off. And then lastly, because of the color and the heaviness of this sample, we will see, does it have any magnetic properties? And you can see that is not really falling off. It did fall off there, but it does look like it's weakly magnetic, which could be a special property that this sample has. So there you go. You can kind of see it hanging on there. So a little bit magnetic for this sample. Okay, moving on to sample number 5. You can see this is dark in color, very shiny. And if you look at it from the side, it has lots of little thin layers. One of them is actually already come off. So you have a nice thin, very, very thin layer here, about the thickness of a piece of paper, maybe even less. Very soft and crumbly. You can see it's already kind of breaking apart. Let's check it with the scratch test. Ooh, this piece I was actually able to get a scratch on it with my fingernail. Let's see if I can show you with the video. Yeah, it's hard to see, but right there, that's the scratch that I left on it with my fingernail. And so I was able to scratch this with my fingernail, which means that the softness or the hardness is less than 2.5. So less than 2.5 hardness on this sample. Let's go through some of the other tests. Does it fizz with acid? Put a little drop on there. I have no fizzing, no bubbling happening. Let's see if it leaves a streak behind. It probably will, seeing as it's so soft. I don't want to push too much, but you can see that it does leave a streak. It's like a dark streak, somewhat glittery, but it does leave a streak behind. I didn't want to press too hard because it's probably just going to crumble because it's pretty soft. And these thin planes, just so you know, these thin planes are a form of cleavage here. So that is visible cleavage. And then moving on to sample number 6. Looks very similar to sample number 5, just a lighter color, so it's not that dark black color that you saw in sample 5. It's more of a light silvery color. It does break off into these thin sheets as well. Let's see if I can get a scratch on it with my fingernail. And yes, again, it's going to be kind of difficult to see, but that line right there is the scratch that I just put on it with my fingernail. So it is softer than 2.5. I was able to scratch it with my fingernail just like sample 5. I'm not going to, because I want to get through this fairly quickly, I will tell you it does not fizz with hydrochloric acid. If I were to drop this on here and wipe it off, it would not fizz. Does it leave a streak behind? Let's see if we can do this on the dark one, because it is kind of light colored. Yes, you can see the streak right here that was just left behind, so a light colored streak. And so sample 5 and sample 6 look pretty similar, just different colors. Sample 5 is dark, sample 6 is light. Alright, now moving on to sample 7, doing an online lab. This piece feels very heavy, just kind of like sample number 4. Actually, it feels a little bit heavier than sample number 4, despite it being smaller. So this one probably has a heavier density to it. You can see that it does kind of have a square shape. These look like crystal faces. I doubt that these are cleavage planes, but probably crystal faces. It is a little bit shiny. Kind of has a dark gray appearance to it, with some shininess on each of the sides. Let's go ahead and do the hardness test. Fingernail, no. No scratches with the fingernail. Let's come over to this side and try with a penny. No. No scratches with the penny. Let's try it on the glass plate. Okay. I got no scratch on the glass plate. Yeah, no scratch left behind for this sample on the glass plate. And so this particular mineral is going to fall somewhere in between 3.5 and 5.5. So despite it being heavy and having a nice shine to it, it's not going to be very hard. It's going to be kind of a medium hardness to it. Just to check, we'll see, does it fizz with acid? Put a little drop, and hopefully you can see no fizzing in that bubble. So no reaction with acid. This one feels a little bit heavier, so we will test it. Does it have any magnetic properties? No, no magnetic properties. I will say, it kind of stinks over here now that I dropped acid on this one. I don't know what that means, but it has kind of like a rotten egg smell. So maybe you're glad that you're not here in class, because you'd be smelling it too. Okay, so I think that's everything for sample number 7. We're getting close to being done. Sample number 8, very shiny. I think you can see the color here in the video pretty well. Let's go ahead. I can tell you this is not going to be scratched with my fingernail. It's probably not going to be scratched with a penny. Even if it was, it'd probably be hard to tell. Let's check it on the glass plate. Yeah, you probably heard that. Nice scratch on the glass plate here when I wipe it away. It left a little material behind, but you can definitely still see the scratch there. So it is harder than the glass plate. So above 5.5. Let's see if it leaves a streak on the streak plate. I ran out of time during activity period. Yes, I have a dark black streak here on the streak plate. It's not going to fizz with the acid. It's not super heavy, but it is a little bit heavy for its size. Definitely lighter than sample number 4 and sample number 7. And is it magnetic? No, we have no magnetics here. So, okay, sample number 9. Almost done. I'll have students coming in soon, so I got to get through this quickly. This one has kind of a reddish color to it. It's going to be pretty hard. Harder than a penny. Does scratch the glass plate. There's a new scratch that I just did. So harder than 5.5 on the glass plate. Does leave a streak behind, and I think you can see this streak is like a dark red color. So it's going to be somewhere in between a 5.5 and a 7.5 on the streak plate. And you see the nice color there for the streak. That should help you identify what mineral it is. Also, real quick, we'll do the magnetic test. And this one is not magnetic at all. It's just falling right off, so no magnetics with this one. And our last sample here, number 10. If you've gotten all the other samples, process of elimination, there should only be one name left. This one is not really clear, but maybe somewhat a little bit transparent or translucent. It's going to be pretty hard, just because I already know what it is. We'll go ahead and go to the glass plate. These are a nice deep scratch in the glass plate right there. So it's going to be harder than 5.5. We will see what's it going to do here. This one actually did not leave. It looked like it left a little bit of powder behind, but it did not leave a streak. It actually scratched the streak plate. And so this one is going to be harder, or close to the hardness of your streak plate, without really leaving a streak behind. Hey, y'all need to keep it quiet for just a couple minutes until the bell rings, all right? Hey, do you hear me? Keep your mask up and keep it quiet. So this one's pretty hard. It's going to be close to the hardness of a streak plate. Harder than glass, definitely. I would not be able to scratch this with a nail. And it does not fizz with acid here. Hey, y'all need to keep it down when you come in. I'm working on a video. Does not fizz with acid, so you have no bubbling going on. And obviously this one does not have any magnetics to it or anything. So I think I've gone over all the different properties for each of these samples. You should now know whether it has a metallic or non-metallic luster, what the hardness is, whether it has cleavage or not, what color the streak is, if there were any special properties, and then hopefully that will lead you to the name. So make sure that you're using all the information available to you. I have the hardness scale that I will post. I have the mineral identification information, which has a lot of information for you. But to be honest, you should be able to get it just with this flow chart, hopefully. So if you have any questions, please email me. I should be able to respond to you by email. If I need to, I'll make another small video just for you. But these are your 10 samples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You will need to answer them in that order on Canvas in order to complete the lab. So thank you, and I will see you. We'll have another lab tomorrow.